I never thought I'd leave the city. I'd been a cop there for almost 10 years. 10 years of sirens, endless paperwork, and a paycheck that barely stretched far enough to cover rent, let alone give my family a life worth having. One night, sitting at the kitchen table with bills spread out like landmines, I came across a job posting. Small town police department. Triple the pay. Immediate start. It didn't make sense. Why would a quiet little town pay more than the city? I reread it 3 times, convinced it was a scam. But the posting was real, verified. When I told my wife, she looked at me like I'd just offered her a way out of drowning. "Go," she said. "Try it. If it's safe, if it's real, we'll follow." And so, a week later, I was driving through miles of empty highway, watching the city lights disappear in my rearview mirror. The town appeared out of the dark like something half forgotten. A gas station, a diner with a flickering neon sign, and a main street that looked more like a movie set than a place people actually lived. Too quiet, too still. The police station was a squat brick building at the edge of town. Only one light burned inside. Chief Miller was waiting for me. He was tall, grey-haired, with lines in his face that looked carved there by the wind itself. He didn't shake my hand, he just studied me for a long moment before finally speaking. "You're Jack?" "Yes, sir." "You came from the city? That's right?" He nodded slowly as though confirming something he already knew. Then he pulled a folded slip of paper from his desk drawer and slid it across to me. "What's this?" I asked. "Rules." I picked it up, glancing at the neat handwriting. There were only 5, numbered 1 through 5. Simple. Strange. I raised an eyebrow. "You give all your officers bedtime stories?" For the first time, Miller's expression shifted, not to amusement, but to something harder. "You follow them, you come home. You don't, well, you won't make it through the night." His tone was flat, final. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound died in my throat. "You're serious." "Dead serious." He leaned forward, his pale eyes locking onto mine. "You'll start tonight. Midnight shift, no easing in. Think of it as baptism by fire." My stomach tightened. "Just me?" "You'll be alone," he confirmed. "That's how you'll learn." I slid the paper into my pocket, forcing a nod. "Understood." On my way out, I caught sight of a bulletin board covered in missing person flyers. The dates stretched back years. The faces were faded, curling at the edges. Miller noticed me looking. "Most of those aren't coming back," he said quietly. That was the moment I knew something was wrong with this place. Still, the paycheck was real. My family needed it. I drove to the small apartment the department had set up for me. It was bare bones. A bed, a chair, a table, nothing more. I lay down, but sleep never came. My mind kept circling back to the paper in my pocket, the weight of it pressing against my chest. When the alarm finally buzzed at 11:30, I got dressed, strapped on my badge, and sat behind the wheel of the cruiser. The town was silent, houses dark, streets empty, like the world had folded in on itself. I parked outside the station, pulled the slip of paper out, and read the first line under the dim glow of the dashboard light. Rule 1. Never intervene if you see the local store being robbed. I stared at the words until they blurred. A rule like that didn't belong to law enforcement. It didn't belong anywhere. And yet, as the clock ticked toward midnight, I couldn't shake the feeling that before the night was over, I'd find out exactly why it existed. Midnight in a small town doesn't sound like anything. That was the first thing I noticed. No helicopters, no sirens bleeding together into a constant migraine. Just the hum of streetlights and the occasional bark that died in the distance like it was embarrassed to be heard. I rolled the cruiser down Main Street with the windows cracked, the dashlight dim. The rules slip rode in my breast pocket like a ticket I hadn't decided to use. I told myself I'd treat it like superstition, respect it without believing in it. That's what people do with crosses on rearview mirrors and lucky coins. The local store sat on the corner, a squat brick box with a glass front and an old bell taped to the inside of the door. Warren's Market, in peeling gold paint. I'd passed it earlier in the day when it was open. 2 aisles, a cooler, hand-lettered prices on cardstock. Now its lights were off. The street lamp out front threw a cone of pale over the sidewalk. Something moved in that cone. I braked. At first, it looked like 3 men shouldering through the front door with the confidence of people who've done this before. But men don't move like liquid. Men don't bend at the wrong angles. One slipped through the gap between door and frame like the glass wanted it there. Another unfolded from the shadow along the wall, slow as someone remembering how to stand. The third kept its face turned away, as if the street lamp offended it. The bell didn't ring. My hand went to the radio. Habit. Then my fingers found the paper in my pocket, and the first line rose to the surface like a bruise. Rule 1. Never intervene if you see the local store being robbed. Everything in me tried to reject the words. I'm a cop. We stop crimes. We don't watch them happen like a movie. My thumb found the button on the mic. My mouth found the lie. Dispatch, Unit 1. Checking on a possible power issue at Warren's Market, I said softly. Lights out. I'll do a drive-by. Silence answered me. I glanced at the radio. The green light glowed, steady and uninterested. I parked across the street and killed the headlights. The figures moved inside now, outlines sliding between shelves. I heard the faint scrape of something heavy dragged across tile. Don't be stupid, I told myself. You were warned. And then I thought about my wife, about the conversation we'd had before I left. Be careful. Don't be a hero. Just come home. I thought about the pay. I thought about how I'd explain to her that I sat in a car and watched a store get emptied because a stranger handed me a piece of paper. I opened the door. The night breathed in around me, cold, damp, familiar in the way all nights are if you've worked enough of them. I crossed the street, hand on the grip of my sidearm, the other hand out, palm open, the universal sign for, I'm here and not shooting. Police, I said, voice low but firm. Let's make this easy. They didn't turn. The glass door hung half ajar. I nudged it with my knuckles. It swung wider with a tired sigh. The bell didn't move. I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not sweat, not adrenaline, not the sour sweetness of spilled soda. Wet earth, mold, a basement that's been forgotten for 100 years. The second thing I noticed was that my breath fogged just once, like the temperature had dipped in the space between the door and the first aisle. Police, I said again, because words are ropes you throw when you're training not to drown. Stop where you are. They stopped, all 3 at once, as if a whisper had moved through them. The nearest one was at the end of the aisle, hunched over a crate of canned soup. Its shoulders rose and fell as if it were deciding between laughter and a cough. Slowly, painfully slowly, it turned its head. It didn't have a face, not a full one. The streetlight reached through the glass and touched something where a cheek should be, and the light recoiled. There was a suggestion of a mouth, too long, too wide, the corners trying to meet the jaw, like someone had drawn it with a shaking hand. The eye wasn't an eye. It was a dark, wet pocket that didn't seem to end. My grip tightened on the gun, and for a stupid, pure second, I understood the rule the way a child understands fire. Don't touch. Okay, I said softly, to myself as much as them. Okay, I'm leaving. The thing's head twitched. No, reset, like it had been bumped and snapped back into alignment. Then it took a step toward me, and the sound was wrong. Not shoe on tile, but fabric sliding across glass, like clothes trying to remember a body. Back up, I said, and my voice didn't want to be my voice. The second one moved beside the drinks cooler, its long arm sweeping the top shelf clean into a burlap sack. The third stood near the counter, half-turned, hair hanging like wet rope, its hand resting, almost tenderly, on the register. I took one careful step backward. The nearest one blurred. I didn't see it move so much as I understood it had. Weight slammed into my chest, a wall hitting a man, and the world rotated. My shoulder found a metal display rack and sent a cascade of gum and lighters clacking over the floor. I landed hard on the tile. Something sharp bit my palm, a knife made of glass and cardboard, and dumb luck. Heat streaked across my hand. I scrabbled toward the door, half crawling, half pushing off the frictionless fear that makes the body fast. A shape, too tall now, too near, flowed into my peripheral vision. It didn't reach for me again. It just stared, or made the closest thing to staring it could manage. The wet pocket where an eye might be didn't blink. It didn't need to. Blink is a human problem. "I'm leaving," I breathed. "I'm leaving." I went backwards through the door like a man avoiding a cliff. The bell still didn't ring. The cold fell away as if the threshold held heat like a secret. I didn't run until my back hit the cruiser. Then I did, slamming into the driver's seat, door yanked tight, locks thumped down. The engine turned over and roared like a friend who'd finally arrived to help move a couch. I looked once because the brain demands a last look, even when it has sworn off looking forever. Through the glass, the three figures resumed their work. No hurry, no fear. The nearest one raised a hand. The movement was almost a wave. Almost. I drove 2 blocks without remembering to breathe. When I finally pulled over, my hand screamed at me. Blood leaked through the cut in my palm, thin and bright, pooling in the lifelines like the future was already written there. I tore a strip from the seatback first aid kit and wrapped it tight, forcing the edges of the skin together with pressure that made stars jump in the corners of my vision. The radio crackled then. The sudden noise was a slap. "Unit 1, status?" The voice was neutral, unruffled. Not Miller, a dispatcher I hadn't met yet. I swallowed. "Unit 1's clear. Routine check." "Copy. 10-8. I sat there until my pulse slowed enough that I could pretend it was normal. Then I did what the rule had told me to do in the first place. I left the store alone. The rest of the shift I kept the cruiser moving. Past the school, past the diner, past houses so dark they seemed abandoned. I told myself I was patrolling, but really I was trying to outrun the sound of my body hitting tile, the sensation of cold attention in a place where people buy milk. At 4:30, I parked behind the station and wrapped my hand again, tighter, cleaner. The bleeding had slowed. The cut looked like a mouth that had decided against speaking. Dawn smudged the horizon, not light yet, but thinking about it. I slept for 3 hours in the apartment that felt like a room formatted to look like a life. When I woke, the bandage had stuck to the wound. Peeling it off felt like finishing what the glass had started. At 9, I walked to Warren's Market. The bell rang when I pushed the door. The sound was ordinary, domestic, almost apologetic. Mr. Warren stood behind the counter, a man shaped like a question mark, thinning hair combed like it still believed in family portraits. He saw my bandage and his face pinched. "Rough first night?" "You could call it that." I stepped up, palm throbbing in time with my heartbeat. "I need to ask you about something." He nodded once, as if he'd been waiting for that line his whole life. "If it's why you saw what you saw, let's keep our voices down." A woman with a toddler paid for milk and left. The door shut. The bell was very polite about the whole thing. Mr. Warren leaned close. "You tried to stop them." "I'm a cop," I said, and it sounded thin in this place, an occupation from a different world. "That's what I'm paid to do." "You're paid more here to do something else," he said gently, "to keep people alive." I stared at him. His eyes were tired, rimmed red the way eyes get when sleep is a theory. "They came in," I said. "They took what they wanted." "And they'll go away if you let them," he said. "Most nights anyway." "You let this happen?" He looked past me, toward the door, like he could see last night still hanging in the glass. "I have 2 daughters in a house 3 blocks from here. They sleep through the night when you let this happen." My throat felt tight. "What are they?" He shook his head. "That's the wrong question. The right one is, what do they want? And the answer is a little, not everything. And so we give a little. Cans, bread, batteries. They like things that hold light. I thought of the cooler, of the long hand sweeping shelves into a sack. What happens if you don't give? He didn't smile. He didn't blink. You wouldn't be asking me in the morning. We stood in the hum of the cooler for a time that wasn't long but felt like it, the way waiting rooms stretch hours into fields. Finally, he slid a small box of bandages across the counter toward me. "On the house," he said. I almost said thank you, and I'm sorry, and this is insane all at once. What came out was, "Does everyone know?" He glanced toward the window. A man in a baseball cap walked by, didn't look in. A school bus rolled past at the far end of the block, a yellow ship in a narrow sea. "Everyone who needs to," he said. "Everyone who lives here long enough." I left with the bandages in my pocket and the rule loud in my head. The sunlight didn't fix anything. It rarely does. It just made the blood on my palm look brighter. Back at the station, Chief Miller waited by the coffee machine like men wait beside machines that have known them too long. "You read the rules," he said. "I read them," I said. "You followed them?" I opened my mouth, closed it. "Not exactly." He studied the bandage. "But you're standing here." "I am." "Then you'll learn," he said. "Tonight, lock the car at 3. I didn't ask why. The rule had already started teaching me its grammar. The second night started with the weight of a secret. I could still feel the sting in my palm from the first rule I had broken, the throbbing cut that made it impossible to forget how fragile the body really is. The bandage around my hand felt stiff, crusted through. Every time I flexed my fingers, pain shot up my wrist like a warning. Rule 2. Always lock your police car at 3 a.m. sharp. It sounded ridiculous. Something kids dared each other to do at sleepovers. But the way Chief Miller had looked at me that morning, the way Mr. Warren had whispered about keeping families safe, I couldn't laugh anymore. I rolled the cruiser slowly through Main Street, trying to act like it was just another patrol. But it wasn't. This wasn't the city. There, the night was loud. Screams, crashes, radios, gunshots. Here, the silence was alive. I could hear my tires press against the asphalt, the low hum of the engine too loud in a town that wanted me quiet. At 2:30, I parked outside the diner again. The neon sign buzzed against the window, spelling open in dying pulses. Nobody sat inside. No one ever seemed to. The air smelled faintly of grease and something older, like wood soaked too many years in the same oil. I checked my watch. 2:41. The paper in my pocket felt heavier with every passing minute. "Just lock the doors early," I muttered to myself. "No one says you can't do that." But I didn't. Stubbornness, pride, whatever name it wears, it's the same sin. A part of me wanted to see if the rules were real or if the town was just trying to break the new guy. 2:55. The streets were empty, but that didn't make them safe. A dog barked somewhere in the distance and then yelped, cut off sharp. I sat up straighter. The diner sign buzzed again, once, twice, then flickered out completely. 2:59. My hand hovered over the lock switch. The digital clock glowed green on the dash, each second crawling forward with exaggerated weight. 3 o'clock. The second the numbers flipped, the lights on the dashboard dimmed. Not out, just low, like someone had placed tinted glass over them. I pressed the locks down in a rush, all 4 at once, and the sound echoed too loud in the car. That's when I heard the first click. Not from the lock, from the handle outside the back left door. A slow rattle, like fingers testing it. I spun, heart in my throat. The back seat was empty, but the handle jerked again, harder this time. Something was out there. Another click, the right side this time, both doors at once. "No," I whispered, "stay locked." The cruiser shuddered, rocked lightly on its shocks, not like a person was pushing, like several were from all sides. A low scrape dragged along the roof, nails or claws, the sound digging into my teeth. I dropped across the front seats, yanked the blanket from the back, and pulled it over me like a shield. I don't know why. Thin fabric doesn't stop claws, but I remembered what Harris had told me the first night. Sometimes the only thing you can do is wait. I held my breath. The car shook harder. Something slammed into the trunk, then the hood. The windshield fogged, though the night was cool. Breath, wet and heavy. My bandaged hand pulsed in rhythm with the sound outside. I gritted my teeth, clamped my palm tighter against the wound. The pain kept me anchored, kept me from panicking enough to unlock the doors. Something brushed against the window above me. Slow, deliberate. The squeal of nails across glass. Then a new sound, a faint tapping, as if someone drummed too many fingers at once. I bit the inside of my cheek until blood filled my mouth. The tapping grew faster, louder, urgent. Then it stopped. Silence. The weight on the roof shifted. The car rose slightly, freed from the pressure. For a long moment, the only sound was my ragged breathing under the blanket. I didn't move. Not yet. I'd learned that much already. Minutes passed like stones dropping in water. My chest screamed for air. My muscles shook from holding still. Finally, the dashboard flickered. The clock blinked back to life. 3:07. The diner's neon light buzzed back on across the street. I threw the blanket aside and sat up, gulping air like I'd been drowning. The windshield was streaked with handprints. Long, spidery, too many fingers. Some dragged down the glass, leaving trails of condensation that didn't fade. I turned the key and the cruiser roared to life. I drove, not caring where, just needing movement. Past houses with dark windows, past the gas station where no pumps glowed. Past the school, its playground swings shifting gently in the windless night. Only when the horizon paled with the first hints of dawn did I slow down. I pulled behind the station at 6 o'clock, killed the engine, and sat in the silence. My hands shook on the wheel. Chief Miller waited on the steps, a coffee in one hand, his other tucked in his coat pocket. He didn't look surprised to see me late. His eyes dropped to the windshield, then back to me. "You locked it?" "Not soon enough." He nodded, calm as stone, "But you locked it." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream at him, ask what the hell was crawling around this town at night. But all I did was nod. "Next time," he said, "don't test the clock." He turned and went inside, leaving me alone with the streaks on the glass, and the gnawing certainty that I'd barely survived a test designed to break me. The cut on my palm had started to heal, though it still stung when I clenched my fist. Every time it throbbed, I remembered the first rule. Every time I flexed my fingers, I thought of the second. By the third night, the paper in my pocket wasn't a curiosity anymore, it was scripture. Rule 3. If someone knocks on your car window, never look at their face. That was the line I kept running over in my head as I drove the cruiser down the empty streets. My headlights washed over clapboard houses, peeling paint, the occasional swing set rusting in a backyard. Everything looked harmless, normal, but so had the market, so had the locked car. I parked near the edge of town, just off a dirt road that led into the woods. Midnight crept past, then 1 o'clock, then 2. The night was thick, heavy with the kind of silence that made you feel like your own heartbeat was too loud. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other near the radio. Nothing stirred, not even the dogs barked here after dark. I told myself I could do this. One more rule, just don't look. Sometime after 2:30, I saw movement in the mirror. A flicker, like someone walking in the road behind me. My pulse jumped, but when I turned, there was nothing there. I leaned back, exhaled through my teeth. "Paranoid," I muttered. "You're getting paranoid." That was when the knock came. 3 slow taps against the driver's side window. Not loud, not threatening, just gentle. My stomach turned. The air in the cruiser felt suddenly too thin. "Don't look," I whispered. "Don't—" "Jack?" The voice froze me solid. It was my wife's. Jack, it's me. Open the door. My fingers curled tight around the steering wheel. My throat worked, but no words came. The knock came again, softer this time, almost pleading. Jack, please. It's cold out here. The kids are waiting. We came early like we said we might. I squeezed my eyes shut. My wife was hundreds of miles away. At least, she should have been. She wasn't supposed to come until I called. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this town.
You're not real, I whispered.
Not real. The laugh that followed was exactly hers, that tired chuckle she gave when I said something foolish. Jack, come on. Just look at me, you'll see. It's me. I pressed my forehead against the wheel, shaking my head. No, it's not. Don't you want to see your children? The voice asked, softer now. They've missed you. They're right here. Just turn your head. Just one look. My body betrayed me. My neck twitched, my eyes threatening to slide toward the glass. I bit down on my lip until I tasted copper. Not real, not real. The knocking grew faster, desperate. Jack, why won't you look at me? Don't you love us? I slammed a fist against the door. Stop. Silence. The quiet was worse. Then another whisper, almost tender. Just a glance. That's all it takes. My hand lifted on its own. I didn't want it to. I told it not to. But I felt my head turn, inch by inch, until my eyes slid to the side. And I saw her, or what was left of her. At first it was perfect. Her face, her hair, the soft smile she gave me the day we married. Then the features stretched, too long, the smile pulling into a gash. Her eyes blackened, the sockets widening until they were pits swallowing the night. Her mouth opened and opened and opened until it split the jawline in two. The sound that came out wasn't her voice anymore. It was a scream boiled underwater, bubbles and shrieks that clawed their way into my skull. I tore my gaze away, slammed it down into my lap, hands shaking. My vision blurred, my ears rang. Warmth leaked down my neck, blood. I didn't know from where.
Jack.
The thing crooned, the voice distorted now, like tape stretched too thin. You saw me. Now you're mine. I curled into the seat, both hands pressed over my ears. No, no, no. The cruiser rocked. Something slammed the hood. Nails scraped the glass again. Then, silence. When I finally dared to raise my head, the window was empty. No face, no eyes. Just the reflection of a broken man in uniform, sweat slicking his forehead, blood streaking down his cheek. The clock read 3:12. I had lost minutes I couldn't remember. I drove until the sun began to rise, one hand on the wheel, the other clutching the wound at my temple where the skin had split. The radio hissed once, faint, then went silent again. Back at the station, Chief Miller waited. He always waited. He eyed the blood, the bandages, the tremor in my hands. You looked, didn't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. You're still here, he said. Most men don't last after that. Consider yourself lucky I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollow, as if something had scooped part of me out and left only the shape behind. But the rule was right, and I'd learned too late that sometimes surviving means not trusting the things you most want to believe. By the fourth night, sleep was a stranger I'd stopped trying to meet. My body moved through the hours, but my mind never rested. The cut in my palm, the blood at my temple, the echoes of my wife's voice that wasn't. Every wound whispered the same truth. The rules were real. Rule 4. If you're called to the cemetery, never use your flashlight. The cemetery sat on the edge of town, a sprawl of crooked headstones and leaning iron fences. I'd driven past it in daylight, and even then it looked abandoned, the kind of place where the ground never fully accepts the dead. At night, under a sliver of moon, it looked worse, like it had been waiting. Dispatch came at 1:47. Unit 1, disturbance reported at Miller Hill Cemetery. Possible trespassers. My throat went dry. Copy, I said, though my hand shook on the mic. I drove slow, each block stretching longer than the last. Houses thinned, then trees thickened, and finally the road opened onto a dirt pull-off. Beyond the fence, headstones jutted from the ground like broken teeth. I killed the engine. The night pressed in. The flashlight lay heavy on the seat beside me. I stared at it too long, its black barrel promising comfort. My instincts screamed to take it. That's what you did in the city. You brought light into the dark. But here the rules said otherwise. I left it behind. The gate groaned as I pushed it open. Rust flaked under my palm. The air inside was colder, damp with the scent of soil and stone. My boots crunched on gravel paths. Each step echoed louder than it should have, bouncing back off headstones like the dead were mocking me. "Hello?" I called. My voice cracked the stillness. "This is the police. If anyone's here, identify yourself." Silence. I moved deeper. The rows of graves blurred together, names worn smooth, dates erased by rain. Some stones leaned, others had fallen. In the distance, something flickered. Not light, movement. I stopped, heart pounding. The urge to reach for my flashlight almost broke me. That's when I heard it. Whispers. Not one voice, but many, layered together, weaving through the night air. Too soft to understand, too clear to ignore. They rose and fell like waves, drifting from stone to stone, circling me. I froze, pulse hammering. "Who's there?" The whispers stopped. Then, footsteps. They crunched against gravel, slow and heavy, coming from behind a row of tall stones. My breath hitched. I squinted into the dark, but the moonlight refused to stretch that far. The flashlight in my cruiser screamed for me. My hand twitched at my belt, searching for something, anything. I found the radio. "Dispatch," I whispered. "Confirm disturbance at Miller Hill." Static. Then my voice came back to me, distorted, delayed, whispering my own words. "Confirm disturbance. Confirm disturbance." I dropped the mic like it had burned me. The footsteps grew closer. I stumbled backward, boots slipping on damp earth, nearly tripping over a sunken grave. My breath came shallow, fogging the cold air. A figure emerged, tall, thin, too thin. Its shoulders sloped wrong, head tilted at an angle that suggested it had forgotten how necks worked. It paused behind a headstone, half hidden, and the whispers started again. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. All speaking, all too quiet to pass, but I felt them pressing into my skull, like water filling a glass. My hands shook. My instincts screamed. "Light. Bring light." I reached for my belt again, fingers grazing the empty loop where the flashlight should have been. My stomach dropped. I'd left it, and maybe that saved me. The figure moved closer, gliding between stones. The moon caught its outline, long arms, too many joints, the hint of a mouth that stretched down too far. I pressed my back against a tree, forcing myself not to move, not to breathe too loud. The whispers rose into a hiss, circling, pressing tighter. Then, just as suddenly, silence. The figure stopped at a grave not 10 feet from me. It crouched, its long arms folding like a spider. One hand reached down, stroking the headstone. Then it turned, not toward me, but toward the earth itself, as if listening. A low sound followed, a groan of shifting dirt. The grave moved. My stomach lurched. I wanted to run, to scream, to tear out of the cemetery and never look back. But I couldn't. My legs rooted to the spot. The figure leaned lower. The soil broke. Fingers pushed up through the earth, pale and grasping. "No," I whispered. The figure hissed, the whispers rising again, covering the sound of soil tearing, stone cracking. And then, as if obeying some command I couldn't hear, the fingers sank back. The earth stilled, the whispers faded. The figure straightened, cocked its head, and melted back into the rows of graves. I waited, every nerve screaming. Only when the wind stirred the trees again did I move. I stumbled back toward the gate, each step an eternity, until finally I burst onto the road. The cruiser sat where I'd left it, headlights off, flashlight untouched on the seat. I climbed in, slammed the door, locked it, and gripped the wheel with trembling hands. The rules had been right again. If I'd turned on that light, I knew, deep in my bones, I wouldn't have walked out. When dawn finally came, I drove back to the station. Chief Miller stood outside, cigarette glowing between his fingers. "Cemetery?" he asked. I nodded, throat dry. "You kept the light off?" "Yeah," my voice shook. "I kept it off." His eyes narrowed. For the first time, there was something like approval there. "Good, you're learning." I didn't feel like I was learning. I felt like I was drowning, slower than the last guy. By the fifth night, the rules weren't words on a page anymore. They were chains, invisible, heavy, and carved deeper with every hour of darkness I survived. Rule 5. If you pass by the forest and see a fire, never report it. It sounded insane, even compared to the rest. Fires spread. Fires destroyed. Back in the city we had a saying, better a false alarm than a burned block. Here they wanted me blind. But the rules hadn't been wrong yet. The night started quiet. Too quiet, the kind that puts weight on your chest. I rolled past the diner, past the school, down the narrow two-lane that led toward the edge of town. Trees thickened on both sides, black silhouettes crowding the road. That's when I saw it, an orange glow blooming through the branches. My first thought was, house fire. My second, call it in. My hand went to the radio, but the words on the paper stabbed through me like nails. Never report it. I slowed, headlights washing over a dirt pull-off. The glow grew stronger, flickering shadows across the trees. Smoke drifted, sharp and acrid, burning the back of my throat. I killed the engine. The silence that followed was wrong. No crackle of flames consuming wood, no pop of sap bursting. Just low chanting, carried on the smoke. I stepped out, every instinct screaming this was stupid, but curiosity dragged me forward. I crept down a narrow trail, the ground soft with pine needles. The fire came into view. It wasn't a wildfire. It wasn't even a campfire. It was a circle of flame, perfectly shaped, ringed with stones that looked older than the town itself. The blaze burned steady, no wood to feed it, no smoke climbing higher than the treetops. Around it stood figures. At first I thought they were people, dozens of them, arms raised, voices weaving into a low, droning chant. But as I got closer, details broke that illusion. Their limbs bent wrong, too long, too thin. Their faces stretched, mouths gaping wider than skin should allow. Their eyes glowed faint, reflecting the firelight like animals caught in headlights. I froze behind a tree, breath caught in my throat. One of them turned, and for a heartbeat, I thought it saw me. Its head tilted, jaw hanging loose, tongue lolling like it was tasting the air. Then it turned back, swaying with the chant. The fire pulsed, growing taller, brighter. Shadows writhed across the trees, twisting like hands clawing upward. The chanting grew louder, echoing inside my skull. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then I heard it, my voice, carried on the chant, woven into theirs. My own words distorted, stretched thin. "Jack, come closer. Join us." My stomach lurched. I clamped both hands over my ears, but the sound pushed through, drilling into my head. My knees buckled. I hit the ground hard, dirt grinding into my palms. "Stop," I whispered. "Stop, stop, stop." The fire flared higher, and for a moment I saw shapes in the flames. Not wood, not ash, faces. Dozens of them, screaming without sound. One figure broke from the circle. It glided, not walked, toward the trees. Toward me. My body finally obeyed. I staggered back, branches snapping underfoot, heart slamming against my ribs. The chanting swelled, chasing me through the dark. I burst onto the road, lungs burning, and threw myself into the cruiser. I locked the doors, slammed the key, and floored the accelerator. Gravel spat from under the tires as I tore away from the glow. Even in the rearview mirror, I saw it. The fire didn't shrink with distance, it followed, burning steady, an eye staring from the forest. Only when the town lights reappeared did it fade, swallowed by the trees. I pulled behind the station and sat, shaking, sweat dripping down my neck. The paper of rules felt like it weighed 100 pounds in my pocket. Chief Miller was waiting inside. He looked at me once, then at the dirt on my uniform, the blood on my hands. "You saw it," he said, not a question. I nodded. My throat was raw. "What the hell was that?" "The reason you're paid more than the city ever gave you," he said flatly, "and the reason you'll stay if you're smart." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to demand answers, demand sense. But the words died on my tongue. Because deep down, I already knew. This town didn't run on laws or justice. It ran on rules. And I had survived 5 of them. Dawn came with a pale sky that did nothing to warm me. The streets were empty as I drove back to the station, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel, the taste of smoke still lodged in my throat. Chief Miller was waiting outside, as always. He leaned against the steps, cigarette hanging from his lips, as though he'd been there all night. I pulled up, killed the engine, and just sat there. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open the door. If I moved, if I spoke, it would all become real. Finally, I forced myself out. Miller studied me, his pale eyes lingering on the dirt and blood smeared across my uniform. "You made it." "Barely," I muttered. He pushed off the step and motioned for me to follow. Inside, the station was quiet, papers stacked in neat piles, a pot of coffee burning down to sludge. Miller opened a drawer and slid an envelope across the desk. "Your pay." I picked it up. Heavy, more cash than I'd seen in one place in years. Enough to cover the bills, the debts, maybe even enough to start breathing again. My throat tightened. "It's real then? The money?" "Always has been," he said. "That's why you came, isn't it?" I turned the envelope in my hands, the paper soft from wear. "I didn't follow all the rules. Not exactly." His eyebrow twitched. "Which ones?" "The first," I admitted. "I went inside. They knocked me down. I got cut." He nodded once, like that was expected. "And the third," I continued, voice low. "I looked. Just for a second. It almost killed me." A thin smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Most don't survive that one. You did." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" I asked, bitterness slipping through. "It should," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're still standing. You've still got a choice." I let out a shaky laugh. "Choice? Feels like I'm already trapped." "You're not," he said calmly. "You can walk away right now. Take that envelope, go back to your family, and pretend this place never existed." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to take the money and drive until the road ended. Forget the market, the cemetery, the forest fire. Forget the voices that wore my wife's laugh. But I couldn't. "Or," Miller continued, "you can stay, keep working nights, learn the rules the way the rest of us did. The pay's steady, the town will be safe, and sooner or later, you'll stop asking questions." My mouth was dry. "And if I stay?" "Then you'll learn how to live with it," he said, "like the rest of us." I stared at the envelope, the weight of it pressed down on me like a stone. My family needed this. They needed me to swallow my fear and keep showing up. But the thought of another night, another rule, made my stomach twist. Miller stood, walked past me and paused at the door. "You've already lasted longer than most. Think about that." And then he left me there, alone with the money, the silence, and the ghosts of everything I'd seen. I stepped outside into the weak morning light. The air felt too still, as if the town was holding its breath. The envelope sat heavy in my pocket, heavier than any weapon. I walked to the cruiser, my reflection ghosting back at me in the glass. Tired eyes, a bandaged hand, blood still drying at my temple. Alive, for now. I started the engine, but before I drove away, I swore I heard it. Soft, almost playful. Someone tapping on the glass of the passenger window. I didn't look. Not this time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more. This is Midnight Jack, wishing you a safe night.